Right now, we want to turn our attention to national news. The U.S. is trying again to ease tensions on the Ukraine-Russia border. Now, Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with Russia's foreign minister today. There were no major breakthroughs in the very high-stakes talk, but it is the latest in the ongoing effort by the Biden administration. And for more insight on the efforts, we are joined right now by Representative John Garamendi of Fairfield. So can you tell us a little bit more about why this is so important to really kind of nail down the talks and going forward, what can be done in this very sensitive environment?
Well, first of all, it's an extremely important situation that's underway. We're really talking about the normal order of nations being totally disrupted by Russia. There's not been a serious invasion except Russia over the last 2 decades. And so this is going to be the be-all and end-all of whether we have a stable Europe or not. If Russia actually carries out its invasion, an all-out military invasion, it'll have a profound effect on Europe and indeed the entire world. And so the negotiations that are underway are extremely important. And simultaneously, those of us in Congress need to work with the senators on setting up very, very serious sanctions. We're talking about not these little patty cakes that have been used in the past, but we're talking about serious sanctions, basically cutting Russia off from the financial world and also cutting off their ability to sell their oil, which is their principal export and principal source of money. That we need to be prepared to do if Russia were to take any invasion at all.
So these are all very delicate and complicated issues. Yeah. So what can we do to really kind of move the needle on this? I mean, there are diplomatic, obviously, but go ahead, sir.
Well, that is certainly the diplomacy is underway. Blinken was, well, actually today in Geneva. Those talks ended. The United States will be forwarding a letter laying out precisely what our position is. And I hope that letter also includes precisely the very serious sanctions that I just discussed. Also, we need to make sure that Ukraine has all of the equipment it needs to defend itself. And that is happening. Over the last year, substantial defensive equipment has been sent in, anti-tank missiles, anti-air, and other kinds of equipment that the Ukrainians absolutely need. More is on the way. We had a discussion yesterday in Congress, and those material that well, they're on your screen. You're showing one of the very important rockets, anti-tank rockets that the Ukrainians will need to defend themselves. So all of that is the piece of this puzzle. We also need to make sure that the Europeans are on board, and that's going to take a little time. Europe is very sensitive to Russia. They get their gas from Russia. They got a lot of economic interchange with Russia. But nonetheless, this is critical to Russia. If this invasion were to occur, the eastern countries are at risk. And Belarus, obviously, already under the control of Russia, but the Baltic states, as well as the states along the countries along the Black Sea.
And Representative, sometimes I find that it is challenging for Americans to understand the full weight of what goes on in foreign relations, where at the same time we are being hit left and right with inflation. We can't find milk. I mean, it's difficult to put our heads around, I feel, sometimes the complexity of what's going on in other countries and the importance of what that could mean for us when we are struggling with just everyday life. But it is significant.
Well, you're absolutely correct. You could not be more correct. Americans are worried about their own circumstances. Obviously, COVID has been, we're 2 years into COVID. It's not over. People are continuing to die. People are continuing not to vaccinate. And so that is a very serious part of our life today, and obviously a serious impact on our economy. However, even so, the American economy has roared back. We have the strongest economy that we've had in, well, a decade now. And that economy continues to grow. Just today, an announcement was made by the president that a $20 billion chip manufacturing facility is going to be built in Ohio. We're bringing things back to America. We're going to make it in America once again. So on the good side, there are things that are going on. We've also passed the the American Rescue Plan that gave the money necessary for the schools to stay open, to put in place the necessary things that they needed to do to address COVID, for businesses, for counties and cities to continue to survive the onslaught of COVID. And we also passed the infrastructure bill. That money in the infrastructure bill is going to flow out, some of it now, more of it over the weeks and months ahead. All of that is jobs, and more importantly, or as importantly, we build the foundation for future economic growth. We got two more things to do, and this is extremely important. The Build Back Better legislation is the social infrastructure. It is the education. It is the job training. It is the daycare centers. It is the early childhood education. And it is for those families that are struggling, it is the child care tax credit, fully refundable month by month. All of that needs to be done. And frankly, we got a problem with the Senate. And probably on top, and the most important of all, is that we secure our democracy, that we save our democracy from the assault that is underway by the Republicans. Trump intends to take over this government using the laws that have been passed in state after state, as well as an 1887 law that is woefully out of date and very, very troublesome. And that is how the electoral vote might be counted. So we've got some heavy work ahead of us, but we've also completed at least two of the four critical issues that America has to do this year.
You know, kind of trying to unpack so much because it is so critical on so many different levels, correct?
Oh, absolutely true. On the international side, did somebody forget about China here and the threat that they pose to the international order as well as to the economy of this nation? Yes, and we know that our ports are still backed up. And that's why a Republican from South Dakota and a Democrat from California, me, have introduced a piece of legislation called the Ocean Shipping Reform Act, so that American exporters can actually export their products. Right now, they have a serious problem in that most of those containers that arrive in America are being sent back to China empty, without American exports. So we're going to straighten that piece out too. So there's big pieces, there's small pieces. Just keep in mind the history of Europe here when you look at Ukraine. It starts sometimes small, and then it envelops the entire world. And so that's what Russia is posing a problem to the international order, to the European states, particularly on the Eastern Front. And where will this go? We need to stand tall. We need to stand firm. We need to make it absolutely clear to Russia that if they were to invade, if they were to start a new war, a full-out war in Europe, the consequences would be extremely severe. They would lose their access to financing around the world. They'd lose their oil market. And there would be severe consequences even beyond that. And by the way, don't count on the Ukrainians just rolling over and let it happen. I was there a year ago, and those people are determined to fight for their country.
Well, I always think that it's actually the small things that makes the biggest difference. So I appreciate that compartmentalization and the breakdown, and it really does all count. We thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to talking more about this, as we really all need to pay attention to those small things, because as you were mentioning, they can turn into really big things fast.
Exactly right. Thank you.